Welcome to a video on operations of integers, adding integers with the same sign. They're asking us to add negative 55 plus negative 9. First, I'm going to notice that 55 is a negative and that 9 is also a negative. So then they have the same sign. That means that we are supposed to add those numbers and we must keep the sign. Well, in this case, the sign that they both have is a negative. So then let's add 55 plus 9 is going to be 64. And then we can't forget to bring down the sign. So then for us, negative 55 plus negative 9 is going to equal to negative 64. We're going to practice adding integers with different signs. They're asking us to add 6 plus negative 9. Notice how 6 is a positive number and 9 is a negative number. Then, because they have different signs, we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the largest. In this case, I have more negatives than I had positives, then the sign I'm going to keep will be negative. We have to be very careful when we subtract. When we subtract these numbers, we're going to subtract the largest minus the smallest. Then 9 minus 6 will give us 3, and then we cannot forget to bring down the sign. Then 6 plus negative 9 is equal to negative 3. Subtracting integers. Because a subtraction problem can be rewritten as an addition problem, we will continue to use the rules of addition for subtracting integers. But we will add one initial step, and that is when we subtract, we're going to add the opposite. So let's practice this rule first before we actually find the solutions. They're asking us to subtract negative 4 minus 6. Just so that I can distinguish between the minus and the number itself, I'm going to place that 6 in parentheses. Next, let's add the opposite. To add the opposite, we will bring down the first value as is. We will change the subtraction to addition, and we need to add the opposite. Now, because 6 is a positive number, its opposite will be negative 6. Then negative 4 minus 6 can be rewritten as negative 4 plus negative 6. Notice that this is the same as just assigning this minus to the 6. Let's try letter B. Letter B is asking us to subtract 4 minus negative 6. Because the second value is already in parentheses, I can skip the first step we took in letter A. Then we're going to bring the first value as is, change the minus into addition. Because the 6 is negative, we will add the opposite, so that will be a positive 6. Then 4 minus negative 6 can be rewritten as 4 plus 6. Notice that this is the same as just thinking that the negative will turn into a positive. Let's try the last one here. In letter C, they're asking us to subtract negative 4 minus negative 6. Once again, the second value is in parentheses, so then I just start bringing down the values. The first value will remain the same. The subtraction will turn into addition, and since 6 once again is negative, we will bring it down as a positive. Then that means for us that negative 4 minus negative 6 can be rewritten as negative 4 plus 6. Notice once again that this would have been the same as just changing the negative into a positive. Now that we know how to change a subtraction problem into an addition, let's go try some examples. Let's subtract negative 4 minus 6. Remember, we can think of this as just assigning that minus to the 6. Now we're going to use the rules of addition to find the answer. Because 4 is a negative and 6 is also a negative, they have the same sign, so we're supposed to add them up and keep the sign. In this case, since they were both negatives, the sign we'll keep is the minus. Let's add them up then. 6 plus 4 will be 10, and then don't forget to bring down the sign. The negative 4 minus 6 is equal to negative 10. So then let's try letter B. They're asking us to subtract 4 minus negative 6. We bring the first value, and the minus will turn that into a positive. We check the signs. 4 is positive, 6 is positive. So they end up having, once again, the same sign. So we need to add, and we're going to keep the sign. In this case, they were both positives, so then we're going to leave them positive. 4 plus 6 is 10. And this time, we don't need to bring down the sign because a positive 10 doesn't need a sign. Then 4 minus negative 6 is equal to positive 10. Let's try it again. They're asking us to subtract negative 4 minus negative 6. We bring the first value. The minus will turn that into a positive 6. When we check the signs, we're going to notice that 4 is negative and that 6 is positive. Because this time they have different signs, we're going to subtract, and we keep the sign of the larger. This time I have more positives than I have negatives, so then the sign we keep will be a positive. The way we subtract is we subtract the largest minus the smallest. Don't forget. So then 6 minus 4 will be 2, and we don't need to bring down the sign because a positive number doesn't need a sign. That means for us that negative 4 minus negative 6 is equal to 2. Multiplying integers. This is to help us learn the rules of signs for multiplication. So let's multiply. In letter A, we're going to notice that we're multiplying a positive number times a negative number. Because they have different signs, we're going to multiply, and the result will be negative. Well, 4 times 8 is 32, and don't forget to bring the sign. So then 4 times negative 8 is equal to negative 32. Let's try it again. In letter B, we're multiplying a negative number times a second negative number. Then according to the rules, we're supposed to multiply, but this time, because they have the same sign, our result will be positive. Well, then 2 times 5 will be 10, and this time we don't have to bring down the sign because a positive number doesn't need a sign. Then negative 2 times negative 5 is equal to positive 10. Let's try one more example. In letter C, they're asking us to multiply negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 7. Remember, the rules we develop apply when we're multiplying two numbers at a time. So then we're going to have to multiply two numbers at a time. The 2 is negative, and the 3 is also negative. Because they have the same sign, we're going to multiply them, and the result will be positive. This will give us a 6, a positive 6. We don't need to bring down the sign. Remember, we're not done. We had 3 values to multiply, so I need to bring down that negative 7. To multiply this one, I'm going to notice, remember the 6 was positive, but the 7 is negative. Because they have different signs, then we're supposed to multiply 6 times 7. The result will be negative. Well, 6 times 7 is 42, and don't forget to bring the sign. Then negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 7 is equal to negative 42. A shortcut for this type of multiplication is the following. You can still multiply all 3 numbers at once. So 2 times 3 is 6, times 7 is 42. But remember, we need 2 of the same sign to be positive. That means that while these 2 signs become positive, we will have a remaining negative, which is why our result is negative. Now we have to be very careful when multiplication shows up with parentheses instead of the times symbol that we're used to. Sometimes we tend to confuse this first expression with this second one. How do we know when they're asking us to multiply and when they're asking us to subtract? Well, notice how in the first one, there is no symbol, there is no sign between the number and the parentheses. When this happens, when the number and the parentheses are next to each other, they're asking us to multiply. Notice on this that between the number and the parentheses, there is a minus. When this happens, what they're asking us to do is this symbol. They're asking us to subtract. So be very careful not to confuse these 2 expressions. Dividing integers. This is to practice the rule of signs when dividing. The rule for division is the same as multiplication. When we multiply or divide 2 numbers with the same sign, the result will be positive. That means that you will multiply or divide as we normally do, but the answer will be positive. And the second one, when we multiply or divide two numbers with different signs, the result will be negative. So let's try letter A. They're asking us to divide negative 27 by 3. We see that our first value is negative and our second value is positive. Because they have different signs, our result will be negative. So then we divide 27 by 3, and remember that the result needs to be negative. 27 divided by 3 is 9, and don't forget to bring the sign. The negative 27 divided by 3 is equal to negative 9. Let's try it again. In letter B, they're asking us to divide negative 100 by negative 4. Since the numerator, that's the number on the top, is negative, and the denominator, that's the number at the bottom, is also negative, then our numbers have the same sign. That means our result will be positive. So then we're going to divide always the numerator by the denominator. That's 100 divided by 4. And don't forget that the result will be positive. 100 divided by 4 is 25. And we don't need to write down the sign because positive numbers don't need the plus. Then negative 100 divided by negative 4 is equal to positive 25. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.